talked about the first four, the yamas, niyamas, asana, and pranayama. So these first four are like the exoteric practices. Exo meaning external. Someone can see and observe these things in your being, in your action, in your relationship with others. And the next four are considered the internal practices, the more esoteric. So these four are often considered the Raja Yoga section of Patanjali's because these are the ones that are working really specifically with the mind. Now, we're going to talk about Pratyahara, sense withdrawal, Dharana, concentration, Dhyana, meditation, and finally Samadhi, enlightenment. So let's take a look at Pratyahara. I'm just going to pull that one up. It's a different one. Okay. Okay, so Pratyahara means sense withdrawal. What does that mean? It means most of the time in our life, our senses are drawn to the things external to us. We're seeing what's happening outside, we're hearing the sounds around us. Even the food that we taste is coming from outside of our body, the smells, etc. The touches that we feel are external to our body. So Pratyahara is the idea of turning all of that awareness inside to discover this internal universe. You know, the analogy of a turtle pulling its head and all its limbs in to be completely withdrawn from the external world. And this state is something that is very important in yoga because we know that in yoga the idea is to become more aware of your internal universe, your internal state. And if we're constantly having our attention withdrawn outside, then it's hard to be aware of what's happening here. So this is something that is also another practice. It's not something that say, okay, I'm going to just do Pratyahara right now, but then you hear someone cough, you hear a car drive by, you smell a beautiful smell, and suddenly your attention's drawn back outside. So it's very important to understand that this is a practice as well, just being able to keep that attention inside. And it gets better, just like all the other practices, the more that we try to work with it. Now, prati literally means against or away. So pratyahara, the control of ahara, gaining mastery over external influences. Now, like a turtle, I already said that one. Withdrawing the mind from the objects of sense experience, the senses follow the mind inward. This is really important. We know from yoga and from other philosophies that when we begin to understand ourselves, then we can understand the world around us. So this is an idea that often we are taught to master the external world. That's something that the Western mind is very important about, how to dominate nature, how to dominate the external circumstances. This is a very different approach. And the yogis have figured out, when you know yourself, you know the universe. When the mind is in contact with the external world, you're not really aware of the aspects of the deeper levels of your consciousness. Who here has already had an experience by turning their attention in? They're starting to discover more about themselves just in the last yoga practices. That was a question. Who here, right? By starting to look inside yourself, are you learning more about yourself through these practices? Are you learning more about how your mind operates? Well, that's the goal. Because if you understand how your mind operates, then you can start to release the things in the mind that are causing us that suffering, that are driving us crazy. Now, the mind isn't the enemy, as I've said, but we want to learn how to make it our tool rather than being the slave to that master. It's a process instead of evolution or externolution, it's the involution. And as yoga we say, it's not a workout, it's a work in. Now, the truth of the mind is to know the infinite existence within you. What happens when you close your eyes? What do you see?
The mind running around.
Okay, you see the mind running around. What else do you see? Anybody?
Some colors.
What's that? Colors? Sometimes, yeah, definitely see some colors. Do you see walls or limitation within your mind? Isn't it pretty much an infinite expanse? As far as you can think, as far as you can project, it will have no end. So that's the understanding that the mind is infinite. And when we start to understand that, then we can understand how we are projecting an infinite universe outside of ourselves, because the infinite universe is inside of ourselves. There is no limitation within your mind when you close your eyes. I dare you to find it. Okay, you can try. The thing is, the purifying the senses is what's going to help us bring that awareness in. So I keep coming back to this idea that all of the yoga practices, even all the spiritual practices, are about purification of the different levels of our being. We've talked about those bodies. Now, the individual self becomes aware of the supreme self. There's something within us that is the divine spark from God manifesting within us. And if we're constantly looking outside, how will we ever come into contact with the divinity within ourselves? There's nothing wrong with, of course, operating in the world, and that's how it works. But if we don't take some time in a consistent, systematic way to turn our attention in, it's going to be very hard to experience that something that's beyond this limited physical body. So Pratyahara leads to concentration, and that's what we want to talk about, these different levels of working with the mind. In order to concentrate deeply, we need to take all of the senses and turn them in. Like we said before, when the senses are going out, it's like one of these light bulbs, very diffuse, not very strong, but when we start to be able to turn all the attention to one point, bringing the mind to one point, this is where it gets more powerful. This is how we tap into the true power of the yoga practices, that one-pointed mind. And we know how hard that is, right? Just trying to say, okay, follow your breath up and down your spine. What happens? You can do it for a few breaths, and then maybe the mind goes to somewhere else. You have to rein it in and bring it back. There's this analogy of, and I said it to one of the students before, one of you before, when you tie a cow to a stake, it'll roam, but it'll get to a certain point where it can't go any further. And it keeps trying, and eventually it realizes, okay, this is all I got. And it sits still by itself. You can untie it. This is the practice we do every morning in asana. I'm hoping you hear this in your sleep. Come back to your breath. Come back to your breath. Why is the breath so important? Because it's what's happening now. And that's really where reality exists, is in this moment. That's the only place we actually have power, and this is the only time the transformation can occur. If you're waiting for transformation to happen at another time, tomorrow never comes. The only time is now. So this is why getting that one-pointed focus is really about one point in the present moment. That's the most important part of this science. This is why Eckhart Tolle talks about the power of now and on and on. All the teachers talk about it because it's actually one of our greatest challenges, is being present. So, stopping the flow of thoughts, turning to external things, the interiorization, it's the practice of observing the thoughts rather than being directed by them. Now, yesterday and this morning, we did a new meditation. We go up and down the spine, we come into the third eye, and then I ask you to start observing your thoughts. So what happens when you start to observe your thoughts? Very often, if you're new to this, and when I'm new to this, and even still after years of practice, you'll get caught in that stream of thoughts. And next thing you know, 30 seconds have gone by, a minute have gone by, and you've just been wrapped up in the thought stream that doesn't stop. Oh, okay, that thing's going and going and going, and suddenly I realize I want to come back to the breath. So that's the challenge, not getting caught in that thought stream. Actually becoming the observer. And that's one of the big things in yoga that we talk about, is this idea of witness consciousness. You are observing everything in yourself, your body, your energy, your emotions, and mind. I mean, you guys are hearing this almost every asana. I try to remind you. This is the journey to understand that when you become the observer, you can let the things flow by. That analogy that I mentioned is very famous in yoga of you are actually the awareness, and the thoughts are just flowing through your awareness. So you are the blue sky, the infinite clear sky, and the thoughts pass through like clouds. That blue sky is not affected by the clouds. It doesn't change. Your awareness, who you really are, isn't affected by those thoughts until you attach to them, until you identify with them. And as soon as you identify with them, then they spin a story out, and that's what takes you out of the present moment. In these practices of meditation that we've been doing, has anybody experienced a bit of bliss? When we live in the present moment, we have access to our blissful state. When the mind is running around like that monkey, hard to be calm, hard to be blissful. But there's not saying that you have to necessarily stop your thoughts, because trying to stop your thoughts is one of the highest levels of yoga. So like I said before, don't worry about stopping your thoughts. The way to get to that point is becoming the observer. And the technique that I've been sharing with you the last 2 mornings is starting to see the end of one thought and the beginning of the next. Has anybody been able to find the end of one thought and the beginning of next? A little bit, right? Sometimes you feel like, as Grit said to me, sometimes I feel like there's 5 thoughts at a time coming in my mind. But the more that we start to observe it, and then I said, look for that space, no matter how small it is, between one thought and the next. The more that you become aware of that space, the more it grows. And this is a practice too. Just by observing that space, when you turn the mind to observe the mind, that's when it starts to lose its power over you. Now, the other thing that I said is try to find where those thoughts are coming from. Asking yourself, what am I going to think next? Did that help anybody to slow the thoughts down a bit? Not a little bit, yeah. Okay. This is a really good practice, guys. Just watching your thoughts. That's really what the deeper level of yoga is now. Okay. We've balanced the body. We've got the energy channels open, and we know that when we calm the energy, it helps to calm the mind. So as we sit in meditation, and all of you have gone through some practice, and you've started to feel some balance in your body and in your energy, then you can start to watch your mind more easily. I'm not saying it's easy, but it gets more easy with practice. So what I'm asking you to do in your daily life or in your meditation, if we just focus on the breath, this is really great, but we're not actually addressing the thoughts yet. So the idea of focusing on the breath is so that we can calm ourselves down enough so we actually have the possibility to watch the thoughts. Now, actually, I'd like to ask you a quick question, because we're going to talk about meditation tonight, but since it's coming up now, what is your feeling of the difference between the two meditation techniques? The first one I said was just following the breath in and out and then coming to the point in the nose. This is the Buddhist teaching of anapanasati. It's the same one they do at Mahabodhi. This is what Sanghasena is teaching. It's the first meditation technique that the Buddha taught, simply to watch your breath. Anapanasati. It's a very ancient practice, and it's very simple. And they say, and you know, just by calming or by beginning to watch your breath, Jin mentioned in his lecture how that will change your brainwave frequency. So it's not that you have to be a masterful meditator. Just by coming inside and watching the breath, you start to change your mind. Now, that's different than the technique we used the last 2 days of observing the breath flowing up and down. Of course, it's not natural because you are directing it through the spine, and it's not really breath. It's more of an energetic and an intention that you're creating with your mind to guide it. So when you're there, if you add the visualization and then you add the mantra, it has more rays of attention, as I was saying. You're working with breath, you're working with sound of mantra, and you're working with visualization. And actually, Greet mentioned the other day that it was a little bit better for her because the mantra helped to trap her mind more. So I wanted to start with the simple anapanasati because it's very basic and easy to learn and to practice. But I find for me that I go deeper into calmness and into one-pointed focus when I bring in more rays of attention, the visual, the sound, and the breathing. So I'd like to hear from you guys. What has your experience in meditation been so far? Because we really haven't had a discussion about it. And this is where I want you to ask me questions, and I want to give you some little tricks, perhaps, that we could call them, to help us get to deeper states of meditation. So let's start with Angela. What has your experience been so far with your meditation practice? Anything that comes to mind?
Well, the first practice, this more simple practice, is very easy. I have no problem with that because I'm really just focusing on the breath. The second one, however, doing the mantra and the breathing part is quite attainable, but the visualization is quite hard for me still.
Yeah. Do you have any difference in terms of how your mind is responding or the state of either bliss or agitation of the mind between the two? Did you notice a difference between them?
No bliss or agitation, but when I find that I have to concentrate really hard on the visualization part, I get a little bit more distracted, actually. But the mantra helps a lot.
Yeah.
Mantras, which I do whenever I do meditation, I end up doing some type of mantra.
Okay.
So that part works really well. But the visualization still is a bit tricky.
Does anybody else feel that way as well about the visualization? It is tricky. Not everybody has the power of visualization. Some people are more auditory, some people are more kinesthetic, some people are more verbal or tactile in their way of learning or dealing with the mind. So like we say in yoga, not one size fits all. And I've had lots of people say this, and I've also dealt with learning to visualize. But I can say that it's worth the time invested because this is one of the highest levels of practice of the mind. Because if you can create a vision in your mind, that is also going to impact your ability to manifest what you're visualizing. And that also takes a tremendous amount of concentration. So the more we practice visualization, even if we're not good at the beginning, just like any other skill, you're a little bit stumbling in the beginning trying to find your way, but if you continue to practice visualization daily, it will develop, and then you'll start to see things more clearly and with more detail. There are practices of concentration visualization where you sit down and you visualize your walk home from work or through the park and try to see every detail you can, things that are real in your life rather than creating something that's just imagination, but recalling something that you've experienced with as much detail as you can. So if you would like to add more concentration to your life, and this is a skill that benefits us no matter what we do, visualization is a huge practice. So the idea is to understand that some of these practices are going to be really challenging, but to keep with them, and you will see a breakthrough at some point.
I have noticed though that when you have us envision a yellow sun, first chakra,
Yeah.
I can do that no problem.
Okay.
But it's the little white light that you have us send up and down the spine that I still can't quite get.
Okay.
But a yellow sun, I can do.
Good. Well, it is only day 2 of that practice as well with the light. But that's also something larger. It's something here at the level of the heart. For different people, there are places in the body that it's easier to visualize for related to chakras, related to energy, and related to mind. So are there any questions actually about the meditation that we did first or second? Any other responses that you have? Yes, thank you, Kazan.
With the visualization,
Yeah.
so I do it like I imagine that like there's a diamond shining or a reflection on water or any. So when you say inhale and visualize the white light going from the traveling from the root chakra to the ground, mine's like it's not like when I inhale, it doesn't go that fast to the crown. And when I'm exhaling, like it travels slowly. So I have like the trouble
Synchronizing.
with the breath. Like
Okay.
that, when I'm inhaling, it like when I'm kind of imagining the white light traveling, but it doesn't. So when the inhaling stops and when I'm exhaling, it doesn't reach till the crown.
Okay.
Yes.
I noticed that too, actually. Yeah.
So I have the trouble with the synchronization with the breath.
Another step you could do is just going to the third eye for now. The crown is more, because this is our mind and we have this connection here. The crown is a bit more beyond the mind. So for some of us, it's actually hard to get to that level. So if that's the case, you can come up to the third eye as well and work with that. See if that helps at all. See if that changes the experience. And anything else, it's just going to come with more practice where you start to synchronize them. Okay? How about you? Cindy, what are you experiencing in meditation practice?
Well, the mind runs quite a bit. I try to visualize the white light going up, perhaps not until the crown. Then when it runs, then I just come back to try to see that white. To me, it's like a dot. I quite like that plus the mantras, Soham. Because then there's more concentration. I feel that it runs less compared to when I just do the breathing. And so for me, actually, the past 2 days and then observing thoughts, that's something I'm more used to in practice compared to observing breathing only.
Yeah.
So in fact, when I was observing breathing, my tendency is to also observe the thoughts and everything else. And so I actually get quite caught up sometimes. And then I come back, okay, let's just try to practice just observing the breathing. But I see the benefits of pure breathing practice as well, just to kind of train the attention rather than to just allow whatever objects that come up and I just be aware. So I'm more used to the past 2 days practice, of the observing thoughts.
Yeah.
But I feel that, it's good to practice all and have that development of the concentration.
Okay, thank you. So who here, before coming to this retreat, has actually had a meditation practice, a consistent or at least semi-consistent practice? Yeah, there's a few. Listen, science is verifying all the time how valuable meditation is, not just for enlightenment, but for health, for stress reduction, and for all the list of physical benefits that literally come from meditation. So if you're doing yoga for health, remember the health of the mind and meditation, how powerful it is for reducing the stress and then starting to go to the deeper levels of understanding in your mind. So as I was saying, this is the hardest practice in yoga for me, is the meditation. And it's the easiest one to let go of. But if you just sit for 10 to 20 minutes a day, it's like building momentum and you start to get deeper. Not every sit is going to be profound, But it's like taking steps towards mastering something. Some days you're really good at it, some days you're struggling. But if you don't take the steps, over the long run, there will be no progress. So that's why I really want to plant the seed, guys. You don't have to do 2 hours of yoga every day, but it is really important. You don't even have to do it with the eyes closed. There are styles of meditation where the eyes are open. But I'm encouraging you to try to look into some different teachers, some different meditation styles, and find one that you feel actually works for you, and bring this into your life. The value is almost immeasurable because of what it can do for all the levels of your being. So that's what I want to leave you with, guys, is how important this is. And think about the difference. We weren't doing that much meditation at the beginning of our first few days of practice, but now that we are, does it feel different as you move into the practice after having sat for 20 minutes? It's a totally different way to start your day. So if you can do that, it's going to set your day, a tone for your day that's quite different than if you just get out of bed and rush into the rat race that we are living in sometimes. So where's your priority? Again, if you really talk about wanting to evolve and transform, meditation is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful ways to do it. So excuses are only holding you back, guys. If you want to do it, then you have to do it. Okay? If you really want to work with your mind, then it takes consistency. There's no other way. Okay? So thank you guys for giving me some reflection. We'll talk more in a minute. Let's go back to Pratyahara. So Pratyahara is often translated as sense withdrawal, and it lies on the threshold between external practices like asana, pranayama, and internal ones like concentration and meditation. And that's what's leading to samadhi. So this is the next step. Okay, in order to be, that's why I ask you to close your eyes during asana when we're not flowing. Because that's the first attempt, is to withdraw your attention through your eyes. Most of our information that comes into our mind is through our visual ray of attention. Just closing the eyes, and you'd be amazed how often I say that in an open yoga class and people just can't do it. For a lot of different reasons. One, the mind's too crazy, or they're afraid of the thoughts, or they don't even have the ability to concentrate to the level to just keep the mind still enough to keep the eyes closed. So this is like a step towards training. Closing the eyes and going inside has a lot of power. And one of the things that a teacher did with me, and I have done with other classes, is everybody wears a blindfold. And then you go through a 3-hour yoga practice without any visual cue. And of course, you can't do a flow. There's certain things you can't do, but there's a lot of asana you can do. And if you never open your eyes, you start to experience a different state, because now you're only having this internal reference. And that starts to bring you greater awareness of how much you rely on your vision and what happens when you cut that stimulation. Because every time you look around, your mind is stimulated. I see a picture that reminds me of the past, reminds me of my mom, reminds me of a love affair, or my whatever, and you start going off. So one of the ways to slow the mind down, okay, so let's be aware of that. All right. Any questions about Pratyahara? You get it? It's really important, and it's very beneficial, but it takes practice, just like anything else. And, you know, we're all young, healthy adults here. We have a long life ahead of us, hopefully. If you start these practices now, it's going to impact you for the rest of your life. Why wait until you're 60, 70, 80 to try to reverse the tide of aging and all the other things that happen from the stress? So just think of this as therapy. This is medicine. It's not about enlightenment at this point right now. It's about how do we live in a world at our highest level of potential. You know, if you really want to maximize your ability in whatever work you do, whatever hobbies you have, whatever passion you have in your life, this is one of the steps to fulfill your life, to really tap into that innate potential that we're all born with. So this leads to the next step, concentration. This is the idea of confining the mind to one point, object, area, or idea. Dharana, holding steady, concentration, single focus. That's the translation. So you'll start to see that Sanskrit has so many. You could look up a dictionary in Sanskrit and try to find a translation. You'll find 30 words or 30 translations for one Sanskrit word because of the richness of the language, and then, of course, context, whichever context that word is being used in. Can you guys see this or not really? Sorry, it's a little hard. I have to see it too. So one mind is concentrated on a point, that's when it becomes intense. And the mind resists, okay? There's so many excuses that come up when you struggle and you've been doing meditation for a week. This is not going anywhere. Why am I wasting my time? This is just silly. I can't control my mind. It's beyond me, so I give up. And this is what I see a lot of people who start meditation practice get frustrated because Sometimes you walk away from a meditation if you're expecting a result, if you're expecting and attached to idea of some sort of action that's going to come out of this or benefit, and it doesn't happen, then there's a bit of frustration. But you do asana and you feel good. So it's easy to attach to asana, and asana is actually a step, as we talked about, that can be a meditation. You know, when we sit in that posture, you can go into meditation. So combine the two and get 2 for 1, and it's more efficient in terms of time management. That's another thing, learning how to use the most efficient practices for yourself. Okay, we've talked about this before, but you have you have to get up, you got to be at work at 8 or 9 or whatever it is, and that means you don't have so much time in the morning. But combining asana with meditation in the asana practice, this can help you to get the benefits of both. So you still get that good feeling of having opened the body, but you're also working with concentration, which leads to meditation. There is no meditation, there is no yoga without concentration of the mind. Okay, if that mind's running all over the place, forget about union with the divine right now. Just think about, how do I start to access more peace in the mind? Okay, this is the discipline, and this is, it's up to you. No one else can do this for us, guys, and that was what I was frustrating with. I sit for meditation for a month and I feel like I haven't progressed. Why am I still doing this? So it's not that I haven't progressed, I haven't reached the state that I thought I was supposed to reach. But I notice when other things happen in my life, I react more calmly. I have less stress in my body and mind because I've calmed my mind a bit each morning. So even just 5 minutes is more beneficial than nothing. And 5 minutes every day is more beneficial than 1 hour once a week. It's developing that groove into your mind that you keep going back. And when you develop a meditation practice at home, it is very beneficial to actually have one specific place for it doesn't have the phone or the TV near it, that people aren't walking through it, and you create your little meditation sanctuary. And you go there every day at the same time, ideally, and you start to create a pattern, a habit. And then you start to also fill that space with your own energy. And then it becomes your sanctuary, if you choose it to be. The Indian texts talk about making sure it's very clean. You put a fresh flower there. You can have a picture of your teacher or a saint or a master that you resonate with. And you go there and you know that you can unplug from the rest of the craziness of the world and have that beautiful 5 minutes if that's all you have, or 10 or 20 or longer. So when you go home, take a corner of your room or wherever you live and create a little sanctuary space, and that's where you go to feel some peace. And it helps to facilitate the idea that there's somewhere that you can go to detach from the rest and go into your practices. So this is another thing that I encourage you to do when you get home. It's another path to purification, right? When you're concentrating the mind, you're purifying the mind. And without the purification of the mind, it's going to be very hard to get to the next state, which is actual meditation. But what does meditation mean? We'll talk about that in a minute. So the power of concentration, just like a muscle, you got to keep training it daily. And it's difficult, you get discouraged. You have to have patience if you're going to be a yogi or a meditator. Having gone through years of meditation, it's like this. Because whatever you eat affects your meditation, however much you sleep, your relationships, your job, the energy around you. So it's learning to accept this moment as it is and accept each meditation as it is. In Zen practices, there's a style where they don't do any technique, they just sit. And whatever arises, arises. So there's no goal of samadhi or enlightenment or any of that. It's just about sitting every day. And this is how we go deeper into the understanding of ourselves, not just our bodies, but of course the deeper level. Now, if you really get good at meditation, this leads to the paranormal powers, the siddhis that we talk about, clairvoyance, clairaudience, reading people's minds, hearing things from a distance. You hear this famous stories about yogis who can levitate. All of this is through the power of the mind. It's all through the power of concentration. Okay. All right, any questions about concentration? Now, there's a couple great concentration techniques that you can do at home. One is very simple. You light a candle and you focus your eyes on that candle. By stabilizing your eyes on a single point, it starts to stabilize the mind. The beauty of working with the candle is that it works with fire, which helps to purify Manipura chakra. And actually, the physical body part related to Manipura chakra is the eyes. So it's a very powerful purification for the level of the navel chakra. Now, if you already have a tremendous amount of fire in your being, then that's not a very good thing to amplify. So you can use what's called a yantra, and I'm going to get to that in a little bit. It's a geometric shape that represents literally the physical manifestation of an energy of the universe. So there's many different yantras or mandalas that we can stare at with that one pointed focus of the eyes. And having done those practices, it is a tremendous discipline that helps to go into greater concentration. So if you feel like you're not having enough concentration to do meditation, many of the yogis say, okay, do the concentration techniques for a while, and that will open up the practice of meditation for you. Again, it depends on how much time you have. It's not always easy to say, okay, I want to do an hour or a half hour pranayama, I want to do a half hour concentration techniques, I want to do a half hour of meditation, oh yeah, and asana for an hour. So suddenly your practice is very long. But just keeping the eyes focused on one point. Even in asana practice, if you're going to do asana practice or with the eyes open, it's called drishti. Your eyes are focused on one point for a reason, so that calms the mind. Okay, now dhyana. What is actually meditation? We're going to talk a little bit. When concentration becomes continuous, so it's not broken, non-stop, because usually we're trying to concentrate, I heard something outside, my concentration's broken, I got to bring it back and try again. When it becomes an extended period of concentration, this is what leads us into meditation. This is why concentration is so important. So when concentration becomes continuous so that there's no break or interruption due to any other thought, then dharana turns into meditation. Have you had that experience where the mind, it can happen at any time in life where you're really engrossed in something. That's why we talk about flow or getting in the zone in sports, in art and music, when you become just so one-pointed that the mind stops. Who here is, I think I could say probably all of you have had at least a glimpse of what it's like when the mind stops. So this is happening because you are so focused. It's basically on a single object. That's another point. So when your mind, now there's lots of different ways to use meditation techniques. We've already focused on breath. Now we've focused on a visualization, and you can focus on a mantra. There's mindfulness where you're aware of your thoughts, your body sensations, your emotions. There are many, many different ways to approach meditation. And one that's really good for beginners that are having a hard time with the mind going everywhere is the mental repetition of a mantra. So just one syllable like Om, Patanjali from the Yoga Sutra says that's the only mantra you ever need. If you repeat that with concentration, that will take you to the infinite. And for some people, it's not detailed enough because it's Om, Om, and suddenly the mind gets a little bored. So having a longer mantra for some of us, like Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, again and again and again. And there are enlightened teachers that can tell you what mantra is right for you based on your karmic patterns, based on your blockages, based on your abilities. And I suggest that you try this for a week and see if this is what you do. You try each one, you taste it. But you can't taste it one day and say it didn't work. We got to actually try it for more like a month. And then after a month you can judge, is this working for me or not? And you try a few different things. That's what I did on my seeking. I went and tried as many different meditation techniques as I could. And as we change through time, our meditation technique can change. Many of the masters say just find one technique and devote your life to that. Because the monkey mind will say, oh, maybe there's a better one out there, and you keep spiritually shopping for the next mantra, the next guru, the next workshop, when already, guys, you have enough knowledge now to develop your personal practice. You know how to do asana, and we can talk about this again. You know how to do some pranayama. What happens is the mind wants more and more and more, and it doesn't hold on to and it doesn't connect to what actually the more simple practices are even more powerful sometimes. So finding a mantra that you can use, if you want to work with Om, you can start there. Be aware that sometimes that's actually hard to keep the attention. So the longer mantras are also possible. All right, meditation is not a practice. It's never practiced. You can't sit down and say, now I'm meditating. What happens is when you concentrate to a certain level, meditation arises naturally. So you can't force meditation. You can practice and set up the circumstances by doing pranayama. And this is a really important point. Pranayama is such a good preparation for meditation. So if you do some deep alternate nostril breathing or do the locks too, because that's really balancing overall, If you do pranayama before meditation, it can make it much easier, because once you balance the energy through the pranayama, as we talked about, energy and mind are linked. That way you can actually start to have easier access to meditation and the meditative state. So you create the circumstances for meditation to arise naturally. 2 factors about meditation. Now, the continuous flow of consciousness of a single object, and the second one is that you are experiencing, there's still a you concentrating. There's going to be a difference between meditation and then the higher state where you dissolve. There's no more you, there's just the one-pointed focus and the merging with that point of focus. So meditation and samadhi, or that higher state, are characterized by that concentration. Now, and not only the concentration, but the awareness of self. And we'll talk about samadhi in a moment. All right. Has anybody ever felt like they're getting bigger in meditation? Like suddenly they feel like they're expanding or lifting off the ground, or they feel lighter. That's one of the stages that happens in meditation, because what's happening is the mind is slowing down or stopping enough where the expansion of your awareness begins to happen. And then you get that feeling, and if you are aware of what's happening, you can feel like you're no longer the body. It's just consciousness expanding. It's not a body, it's not even energy, it's consciousness. And suddenly you're getting bigger and bigger. Sometimes you can feel as big as a house. Sometimes you feel bigger than that. And eventually, ultimately, what will happen is you will feel and experience that you are as big as the universe. That's what happens when you go beyond the mind. So, expansion of the mind. What's going on here? Okay. So, before we leave this retreat, I suggest and encourage you guys to develop a personal meditation practice. It doesn't have to be long, but find a way each morning, especially in the morning, because that sets the tone for the day. It's also really good to meditate at night before you go to bed, because this will help to clear the mind of all the stressful thoughts, and that will lead to better sleep, better health, and actually start to more lucid dreaming, which is another level of yoga, being aware of your mind even when you're in the sleep state. And that's something for another topic. But any questions about meditation? I'm really simplifying it now, but I want you to understand that it's not one size fits all. So try a few different things. And a great thing to do is to go to a silent meditation retreat. You know, it's wonderful to go out external and play and play and play and explore the external world, see every country and every continent. But this internal journey is the ultimate journey. And yet we avoid it because it's a challenge. And sometimes we feel frustrated and it's not successful. But when you set yourself down into a guided meditation that's in a group, that group energy actually helps to support you. When you go into meditation that's silent and everybody's silent, it's easier for you to also be silent. So it's a supported way to go deeper into meditation. There are 3-day, 7-day, 5-day, 10-day, etc., etc. I would start with a 3-day, because the first time I sat, it was a 10-day meditation, and this teacher on the 3rd day had us sitting for 3 hours. And I was blown away. It was so much pain in my body, so much struggle in the mind. It was a feeling of torture. So I wouldn't recommend that to anybody else unless you really want to see what you're made of. But starting with a nice 3-day simple meditation retreat somewhere, it's a step to helping you cultivate even more understanding of the power of meditation, and it will also help you to cultivate your own home practice, because then you've already had a longer understanding of sitting with the support of a group. You start to learn how to get your body in that position, and that's the other hurdle or the other obstacle, is the body in meditation. Oh, my knee hurts, my back hurts, suddenly I'm falling over because my muscles aren't strong enough to hold me up. The best way to get better at sitting, yoga asana, of course, stretching and opening the channels and strengthening the muscles, but then just sitting a little bit every day. Because if most of us, I grew up in a chair, and then they try to tell you to sit without a chair, suddenly it's really challenging. So just a little bit of sitting each day is starting to develop the physical ability to sit for longer and longer. You don't have to sit cross-legged by any means. You can sit in a chair. Okay, there are some people that think, it's not really meditation if I'm not sitting like the Indian posture or the Buddhist posture in lotus. And that's one of the great teachers we already talked about, Yogananda, who relates a lot to Christianity. He said the most important thing is, of course, your comfort. So sometimes when I have people come in who are new and stiff, You get them sitting on 4 cushions, and then you put cushions under the knees. If you want to be more comfortable for your seated practice, put cushions on your knees, because there's a lot of tension here, a lot in the hips, the lower back. By using props, then you can still sit cross-legged on the floor, and you get that benefit. There is a benefit to sitting cross-legged because it locks the energy in. But sitting in a chair, you can also meditate. And even if people are sick and can't get out of bed, they can still meditate laying on your back, although that tends to lead to falling asleep. That's why it's not recommended. But if there's no other choice, people can still experience peace by going into their breath and going into the mental awareness practices. Okay. Now, yeah, please.
For sitting in a chair, I think one should not lean back. One should be sitting straight up and not use the...
Well, until they can, right? So just sitting up is starting to develop that practice, but not everybody can even do that. So what I have people do is sit for as long as they can, and then they lean back. Because if they can't do this anymore, what's the point? So it's important to sit to develop the strength in the back to be able to do it. And then when you finally get to the point where it's so much that there's no chance of concentrating on anything else than the pain in your back, relax and still go into meditation. You know, there was a style of meditation I did. It was a 24-day retreat, and they let the body do whatever it wanted. They said, okay, because if you're sitting in meditation, no, I looked, as you're going through these days and days, eventually you see other people, and people are like this, and the body's just doing it once, and you get to relax into the body, rather than this force of like, okay, I have to be erect like a straight tree. And I found actually I went really deeper in those meditations at some point. But there's so many different approaches to meditation. So what I encourage the beginners that come to me for learning meditation, if they can't sit on the floor, sit in a chair, sit up straight, have that cushion there, and then when it's time, relax into it and stay with the meditation process rather than having to come out due to physical limitations. Okay? All right, so the final stage, what all of this is leading to, essentially, eventually, is Samadhi, which is simply another word for enlightenment or nirvana. If we look at the meaning, Sama means equanimity. Does everybody know what equanimity means? It means balance, equality. And D is intellect. So this is when your concentration gets so profound that it never breaks and takes you into meditation. Now it goes deeper than meditation, because in meditation you're still aware that I am meditating. There's a self. I'm meditating on an object. And you can meditate on visualizations. A lot of people in yoga talk about the power of the symbol of Om. So visualizing that symbol is also very powerful. Now what I'm saying is, when your mind is so concentrated you lose yourself, you become the object you are meditating upon. You merge with it. That's why we don't meditate on a dog or a cat or a tree. We meditate on something of a highest vibration, whether it be a visualization or a mantra or one-pointed focus of the mind on the breath. So this idea of losing yourself scares some people. And actually, people who go into meditation and are in practice, suddenly they dissolve, and that can be a very bizarre experience the first time it happens. And actually, when you're in that experience, there's no awareness of it. You only realize it when you come back and realize that there was a different experience. So, Dharana, the conscious is broken, but Dhyana, consciousness is continuous. So that's meditation, concentration is Dharana, Dhyana is meditation, and then Samadhi is the consciousness is one with that object of meditation. Has anybody ever experienced that state? We can experience Samadhi in our lives. It's not just for the mystics that live in caves. If you're watching a beautiful sunset and suddenly you feel like you are the sunset, that's a state of Samadhi. And you can have little glimpses of this at different times in your life. Like if you're really into dance and suddenly the dancer is gone and just the dance is happening. Osho is a teacher that talks about this a lot. You become the dance. So there's no more this individual ego dancing. The universe is flowing through you and dancing you. And this can happen in breathing meditations. You're no longer breathing. And I've had this experience. It's amazing. You think that you're in control, and suddenly you realize you are being breathed by the universe. It can happen in art. The art is happening through you. You're not actually creating it. Something greater than you is flowing through you and making this happen. So you can have this at different stages in your life, meaning this isn't something super inaccessible only for the yogis who live in the Himalayas and spend their whole lives meditating. This is something that once you experience it, changes your perception of who you are and what your body and mind actually are doing in this universe. So there's no conscious awareness that you're even practicing concentration. The object of concentration shines completely alone in your awareness. That is all there is. It's just this object. So in meditation, the object of meditation becomes clearer and clearer, and appearance becomes more and more vivid as you go deeper in stages of samadhi. Now, this being said, there are different stages of samadhi. And Patanjali, the author of the Yoga Sutras, talks about different stages. Eventually he talks about, and I'll get to it here, so I don't want to repeat it. Like I said, you're not even aware that you're the one doing concentration or meditation. So we had two characteristics of meditation, the two characteristics of samadhi. The object alone shines, and there's no awareness of the process or the self. Now in deep meditation, suddenly there becomes a void. And the void doesn't mean complete emptiness. Now there's a bit of a dispute between different schools, lineages around the world that talk about the void as emptiness. The yogis and even a lot of the Buddhists talk about the fullness of that emptiness in which all potentialities exist. It's the infinite potentiality. So it's not emptiness like blackness and nothing else exists and you're totally in a state of darkness. It's actually a state of light. So from that darkness, from that void arises the infinite light or the experience of that infinite light. I can tell you one time, probably the most profound experiences of one of my first years of yoga was looking deeply into a yantra that I mentioned about that geometric shape for Sahasrara chakra. And eventually at some point, the mind stopped and all there was light, infinite light. And within that infinite light was perfect bliss. And it didn't last that long, but it was long enough to realize that there's something so perfect. It's so perfect. And it's divine. The words will never get you there, but I'm trying to articulate the experience of how much it transformed my understanding of what reality is. It didn't make me enlightened, perhaps, but it did help me to see something beyond my normal experience, that opening is what impels me down the path today. Because I know that through meditation and through these practices, we get more in touch with who we really are, which is what is beyond the mind. So all we need to do is understand that our practices aren't for a goal. It's not about attaining that white light. It's not about attaining samadhi. It's about, for me, I can say my philosophy is it's about maximizing my human potential, and whatever comes from there is the benefit of our daily practice. So understanding that there's something more than the mind, it changes how you work with your mind, if that makes sense. I'm really, it's a hard experience to articulate, but I can tell you that these yoga practices work, okay? And I'm no special person. I just decided to do some concentration long enough where it actually helped my mind get to a point where I could see something beyond the mind. And if you have that glimpse, and I know everybody who I've talked to has had that glimpse, says it changes the rest of their life, because then you don't have the same understanding and you can't go back. And that's why I do what I do now, is because of that glimpse. And the glimpse gets repeated, or it can get repeated and can get extended, and that continues to change your inner relationship with reality, so to speak. So samadhi is like the perfect meditation, okay? Now, no time, no space, no ego, no individuality. So Patanjali, as I said, describes 6 levels of samadhi, and the highest level, your breathing stops, your heart stops. So these scientific experiments that I've done with yogis, that literally they bury them under the earth for several hours to several days. What they're doing is they're putting them in a state of, they're putting themselves, because they're so skillful at it, they can do it anytime they want. They put themselves into samadhi. They're buried under the earth. They have EEG measurements. They have everything measuring all the different systems in the body, and they all shut down. And you would think they're dead. But when they dig them up and they get the cue, however it works in each individual case, you can research this stuff on Google. I'm not making this up. This is scientifically validated many times. And they've been in samadhi, everything stops. And that's the deep level. Now, even in concentration types of meditation, have you noticed your breath stop at some point? And then you think, I'm not breathing. And of course, that takes you back out. And even when you're practicing meditation, it's a very funny step in the process. Your mind will stop and suddenly you think, I'm not thinking. But that's a thought. And it takes you right out of that no thought zone. But next time you get there, the more times you go there, you're more comfortable and you don't start to try to analyze it with the rational mind. So this is proving that the body doesn't actually need the respiratory system and all these other systems to survive. What happens is they actually are surviving on prana that's already in them. And of course, if you shut down all the systems, there's no more need to metabolize prana, let's say, because all the systems have been shut down. Have you guys ever heard of those experiments where people are buried under the earth? Yogi, it's incredible. Please, it's you can find a lot of information on the internet about this, and to me, it's just inspiring to see what the human being is capable of. Okay, so other lineages actually talk about things that are even deeper or more profound levels of samadhi, and we're very close to one of the highest level of teaching according to them. We always say we're the highest level, but out of Kashmir is a system called Kashmir Shaivism, and they talk about how you can be in samadhi with the eyes open, where you're one with the universe. So you're experiencing that oneness at the same time you're experiencing that there's an individual being that is being guided by the universe. So you still have that identification with the body, but you also have the experience of the infinite. And that's higher than just experiencing with the eyes closed in a silent state of immobility. Being able to move through life in that state is what they say is the highest ability of any human being. And that's called, and we'll talk about the name. So Ramakrishna, we talked about some of these famous teachers, Shankaracharya, Aurobindo I mentioned the other day. They were reported to have experienced that state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi with the eyes open, or higher than Nirvikalpa Samadhi. All right. Now, we mentioned this the other day, just to round it back up to this, and we'll wrap it up. Asana practice can do all of this, right? You're working with the body, you're focusing the mind on the breath, you get the one-pointed focus of the mind. It doesn't happen when you're flowing necessarily, but if you sit in this posture long enough, you get one-pointed focus of the mind, you can go into a deep state of meditation and even experience samadhi, where you are not there anymore, just the focus of the concentration at the root chakra. And you can go into samadhi at the different chakras, and there'll be different types of samadhi for each chakra. Whatever you perceive is you and you alone. Through our eyes, the universe is perceiving itself. Through our ears, the universe is listening to its harmonies. We are the witnesses through which the universe becomes conscious of its glory, of its magnificence. This is a beautiful way to say what I've been trying to say. We are God watching God through these eyes. We are God experiencing God's creation through this vehicle. And if you haven't heard of Alan Watts, has anybody here heard of Alan Watts? Listen to him on YouTube. His voice will put you in a trance alone. Do you enjoy listening to him? And he's so articulate and actually poetic, and he's bringing the teachings down to a practical level that we can understand, even if we're not yogis, even if we're not deep in meditation practice. The way that he describes things makes so much sense, and I really encourage you to look into this Alan Watts teacher. There's a few modern teachers. He's passed away in the last century, but he's a modern teacher, so he's teaching to a modern audience. So people like him and the other guy talked about, the yogi, Sadhguru, Eckhart Tolle is a great modern teacher, and there are others, including Byron Katie and etc., that we can have access to easily for free. So if you're not into reading a book, listen to his voice inspire you for 5 minutes in the morning and set your path for the day. Or listen to any of these people on YouTube or watch the video. I like to connect to people, to see their energy, to see a face. It's more human. It feels like it's more relatable. So just trying to connect with these teachers a little bit each day. It doesn't have to be an hour of study, but we talked about the importance of study last class. Svajaya, the self-study and the study of the text, which helps reveal the true self. Just a little bit each day. And again, go to the masters. This guy, Alan Watts, his speech is so beautiful, it's like intoxicating in a way. He puts you into a trance. He can put you into a trance with his voice.